So why did Metamorphosis actually fail? So make sure you guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more awesome content. So this has been an interesting topic that I've been keeping an eye on with Metamorphosis's return back to the OCG, because Metamorphosis has always been viewed as one of these crazy cards that if it ever comes back, the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is ruined. You know, for years, you guys all heard the Black Luster Soldier getting Metamorphosis after you banish their monster, you know, make that cyber twin. You know, you turned your envoy into an attacking machine. And in modern era times, it's like, oh no, you know, I can turn my Kashtira monster into the last warrior from another planet. And, you know, it's like, oh my god, that's an auto-win condition against certain decks. Wait, Imperm? Droplet? Oh, people don't play these. Yes, they do. The reality that we have walked into with these, quote-unquote, we're going to call them boogeyman cards. They're cards that were so extremely broken during their competitive times that when we approach them in the new era, you know, 20 years of power creep in a card game is an insane thing, people. You guys do realize that when you start printing all of this new support, that, you know, things are going to change. You know, you're going to start to, you know, see, oh, well, you know, this card was broken, but like, I don't have, you know, Black Luster Soldiers. You know, the extra deck. This has been, I think, the most interesting part of this. The extra deck, we have so many more tools than we had years ago. You know, also to be fair, the extra deck was an unlimited resource back in the day. You could slap thousands of cards. You could take 3 of every fusion monster in the game and you could slap in that bad boy. And you would have immediate access to it. But that's not how the game has evolved over these 20 years. The game over the last 20 years has evolved into, you know, do I want this tech option? Do I want to play this? You know, is there a reason for me to want to approach this? You know, is this, dare I say, the most important word of this comes down to the word searchable. You know, Metamorphosis coming back as a one of in the OCG. The question there becomes, you know, how searchable is this? You know, there's the option to thrust into it. Okay, so now we're looking at 4 possible spells within the deck, but then that would mean that my opponent has to have an interaction to, you know, trigger the thrust in the first place, you know. So what interactions am I going to be using to trigger this thrust? And, you know, what deck is going to be, you know, famously good enough to use this? Now, one of the main decks that was talked very heavily about when this actually did get its unban was actually Mitsurugi. And Mitsurugi is a deck that already naturally wants to be tributed. You know, you could activate, you know, tribute your Murakuma. Oh, congratulations. You know, you've tributed the monster. Now we are getting the opportunity to access and do some of these other little play lines. Okay, well, that seems a little bit scary, but let's talk about it like this. All right, Mitsurugi, you already want the monster on the field to basically be able to floodgate. You want the ability to tribute it off with the purification so that it can come back as a board wipe. Oh, okay. So is Metamorphosis worth it in this? No, it isn't. It just isn't. The way that Mitsurugi plays, and it's crazy to think about because Mitsurugi was the only real deck that gave this any time of day. And it's the only deck that I've seen it actually come up. To be fair, I think out of every, and it was only like the first couple of days of the list. Actually, no, it wasn't even the first couple of days. It was before the new list went into effect. I saw a lot of people that were like, hey, you know, we can play some Mitsurugi as a one-of. You know, it comes up some of the time, but it's like, okay, well, you know, we get access to, well, I guess Exterio was one of the other little cards that did come up. And I mean, anytime Exterio is put on the table, I mean, he usually ends up being a pain in the butt, but you're not meting, you know, Mitsurugi into Exterio. I will tell you, Exterio is definitely one of those cards you look at and you're like, well, yeah, I can win a matchup that was a little bit more subpar. But back to the Mitsurugi thing. Mitsu was the first candidate to play. This one was the only candidate. So what happened to the rest of, these ideas? What happened to the last warrior idea? What happened to all these other things? Well, the Kashtira package is in different quantities in the OCG. I think that's one of the more interesting things to kind of talk about. They still have a Rise Heart limited, or he's still legal over there. And then the OCG took Fenrir and Unicorn and actually limited them to different capacities than TCG does. TCG's just got full steam ahead. We can go play all of the craziness that we want to with that package. That was something that we, has made a difference. Fenrir has been a little bit of an obstacle at certain points in our version of the game, but it hasn't been, dare I say, one of the unobtainable results. It's been an annoyance. I do kind of think that with Kashtira being slightly more limited, that might have had an impact on at least, the last Warrior span, but we also come back into, Dominance Impulse is a card. You activate Metamorphosis, I impulse it. It's also a card that's still limited to 1. Now, does moving Metamorphosis from 1 to 3, does that make the playable difference? I think it does. I think more people would be more inclined to play Metamorphosis if it was a 3 of. And do I foresee Konami bringing meta back to 3? Probably, honestly. I feel like this is one of those cards that Konami takes a look at and they go, oh, we just brought this back. Why are people not doing this? They're going to try to, once again, they're pushing this in the Limit Over collection for sure, where, it's already getting reprinted and that's, and it's a key component selling point for this. So you have to move cards back on list to entice people to want to go pick them up. You got to remember, the ban list is one of the greatest selling point / control tools of power creep that modern era Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually has going for it. And if we don't appropriately use this to check these, then, it all just kind of falls apart. And, Konami underutilizing a marketing tool, strange concept, I know, but I know this kind of devolved from, Metamorphosis failing to, marketing and things, but it's kind of how it works, right? And also, if Metamorphosis is a card that actually, seeing the shift from 1 to 3, if it does make the difference, Exterior, Last Warrior, the Cyber Twin, anything within that scope of fusion monsters that can actually be usable by definition, those are all going to be key support cards that players are going to actually want to play. And I don't think, as much as Last Warrior is a pain, you've got too many checks in the existing game that is just going to, kind of send this back to the Stone Age. So yeah, Metamorphosis outright failed the return back to the game. Making cards that aren't, or that are fusion spells, that aren't searchable, doesn't have poly in the name, doesn't have fusion in the name, all this Predaplan support, all this other support that we've got, you can't do anything with. And you can also make the thing of, maybe Konami is going to make some future support for this. Well, there was Neo Bubble Man. There is the possibility we could see Clay Guardian or the Mudball Man Metamorphosis target. It is highly possible. This is, year 2 of GX airing, and I would not be surprised to see Konami wanting to kind of push a little bit more of that agenda to kind of bring some more of this up. That could technically save Metamorphosis a little bit, but then that would mean that I would have to play it in Heroes, and I don't think we're doing that. Heroes already has the tightest extra deck in the entire game, and you're telling me now that you'd want me to play Metamorphosis in there? No, it's not going to happen. Maybe somewhere Konami will have a way to save this card, but until that time comes, we will have to wait and see. So please, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think. I'll see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.